Hello, everybody. This message continues our series on Leaven in the Word. This is part 3, where we talk about false doctrines about the nature of God. And previously, we talked about, in the first one, we talked about Matthew 13:33 and its implications and its connection with Jesus prophetically speaking about the doctrine of the Trinity. I encourage you to go back and look at that if you haven't seen it. So, we also learned that it is essential that we share the truth and engage people in debates and arguments about the nature of God. And it's okay to disagree, and it's okay to engage people, just as long as it's done respectfully and in the will of God, and we love them. So today, for today's part, I want to share my experience with you with some. We're going to continue on and look at some scriptures. In this one, where Trinitarians make certain claims over some scriptures, and I want to expose and show you the problems with their claims. So we're going to start right at the very beginning, which is the book of Genesis. So Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, out of the NASB. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was a formless, desolate emptiness and darkness over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Now, a lot of Trinitarians don't usually cite this verse, or this. They usually don't cite this to defend the Trinity, but there are a few that do. And it's interesting that they do that. So I want to make some observations about this passage before we go into their claims. So the first observation is that in the beginning, God. Is there a plural in there? No. Singular. So there's no other beings mentioned. And number 2 to observe is the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. The Spirit is Strong 7307, Ruah. The Ruah of God we know as God's essence, presence, and power. It is what God is. So Brown Driver Briggs defines spirit as wind, breath, or mind. The term of, spirit of God, of being a preposition, is a term that means it's an expression of a relationship of one term to the next, essentially an attribute relating to the subject. Here are some examples. The sleeve of his coat, days of the week, a piece of cake, a lot of money, a height of 10 feet, the coast of Washington, photograph of the bride, hand of Peter, finger of God. So God is spirit. We know that if we were to express his essence, power, and presence, that if it was near a place, that we're trying to describe it was near a place, we'd likely say something like the Spirit of God was near the temple. Or God's Spirit dwelt in the land. That's how we would express the presence of God. God's Spirit, his essence. It's basic reading skills. Anyone would see that. Unfortunately, the Trinitarians make 3 interesting claims. The first one is the term for God is Elohim. And they claim that Elohim means it indicates plurality. There is some truth to that. But actually, let me finish going through the claims first, then I'll go through that. Claim 2. Jews did not properly understand the expression of God created in verse 1 because it is such a rare expression and it's conjugated in the plural, which was considered rare in Hebrew. Claim number 3, the Spirit of God in verse 2 shows another person. we see God, which is person number one, and Spirit of God being person number two. So let's talk about the first claim. So we just talked about the meaning of Elohim. Elohim is a plural of majesty. Whenever it's referred to Yahweh, or the name of God, Yahweh, it's always singular. Briggs, we'll call it Briggs, recognizes that there is a certain plurality to it, but it can mean like a group, but that is not, it's never applied or used in that way with Yahweh. Never. There also is precedent for Elohim to be used in the singular in reference to a pagan god called Dagon, because that's singular. Reference for that would be Judges 16, 23 through 24, 1 Samuel 5:7, and when it's talking about plurality, Psalm 82, 1. But when it's referencing God, we're talking about a plural of majesty. If you read the definition in Strong's and you read and Briggs, you're going to see that there is a singular meaning with a plural of majesty, or there's a plurality, but it's like God being everything we need him to be. But that's never applied to anything else in the Old Testament. Nowhere. So Elohim is definitely singular and not plural. And it cannot be used to reference multiple persons. It just can't. If that were the case, then the Jews could be Trinitarians today. They wouldn't have a problem with a multi-person God. But they do. And I'm going to show that. The second claim is more of common sense. This is by saying the Jews didn't understand their own scriptures is absurd, to say the least. They were administrators. I don't know what the right word for it is. Administrators of the word for over 3,500 years, and they didn't know their own scriptures, the ones that God inspired them to write. Come on. No, that claim does not hold water at all. They make that claim based on a lie from claim 1, saying it was conjugated in the plurality. Well, there is no plurality. We know that. That's not what we know. We talked about Elohim. Claim number 3. This is a pretty easy one too. They claim that the Spirit of God is the third person of the Trinity. Well, if my hand moved over the podium, does that make my hand a person? No. We're talking about the Spirit being God's essence. We're not talking about a person. We're talking about God's essence and description. We just went over that language just a minute ago. So with that, John 4:24, 2 Corinthians 3:17, and 2 Corinthians 3:17. I have it down twice. So, I'm sorry. So what do others say about the Trinity? Well, Jews for Jesus, who are unfortunately in this doctrine, here's a quote I found from Jews for Jesus. It is an all too common assumption that the concept of the Trinity is purely a Christian idea, but the idea of a God being three in one unity actually has its roots in foundational Judaism in the Hebrew Scriptures. That statement is a bold-faced lie. Let me cite 2 examples of rabbis today on what they have to say about that. Jewish Rabbi Stanley Greenberg says, Hebrew scriptures are clear and unequivocal on the oneness of God. Monotheism, an uncompromising belief in one God, is the hallmark of the Hebrew Bible. The unwavering affirmation of Judaism in the unshakable faith of the Jew. Under no circumstance can a concept of plurality of the Godhead or a trinity of the Godhead ever be based upon the Hebrew Bible. That's a Jewish rabbi said recently. Here's another one that I found. Rabbi Tovia Singer, he is with outreachjudaism.org. He says, Christians explain away why the church has its core tenets that are completely opposed by the Jewish scriptures are certainly nowhere found in the Hebrew Bible. This presents a very big problem for Christians. The problem is that there's nothing remotely like the doctrine of the Trinity, for example, anywhere in the Tanakh. And the Tanakh, we are told, there is no one else in Deuteronomy 4:35. You were shown these things so that you will know that the Lord is God, and beside him there is no other. Can it be any clearer on what Genesis 1 is saying? And that is part 3.